In this episode of the Encourage and Inspire podcast, I have a special guest with me. His name is Doug C. Brown. He's a renowned revenue growth specialist and strategist, founder of CEO Sales Strategies. He brings a unique perspective from his journey as a former musician to into the business world, where he shares invaluable insights into the intersection of creativity and commerce. In this episode, Doug discusses the challenges faced by artists in monetizing their craft and the importance of adopting a business mindset. He reveals how musicians can effectively balance their passions with practical sales strategies to grow their fan base and increase revenue. Join us for a great engaging conversation with actionable steps and inspiration for artists and musicians alike, as Doug provides the tools you need to succeed in today's competitive landscape. Don't miss the opportunity to learn from an expert and navigating revenue growth. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Encourage and Inspire podcast. This is going to be season 4. I want to say we're in season 4, right? In terms of this recording. Um, and I got a great special guest today for this episode. He's a revenue growth strategist, sales, really a business guy, but happens to also be a former musician. So this kind of works out really cool. Doug C. Brown of CEO Sales Strategies. How you doing, Doug?
Hey, Darrell, good. Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you, man. Thank you. No, one of people on your team found my podcast,
Yeah.
and every once in a while, my podcast owner, the network owner, will get an email. Somebody saw my podcast, and my podcast is still, we're not a large platform just yet, but every once in a while he'll get an email. But like, yeah, somebody found your podcast and wants to wants you to interview a guest. So this is how we got connected.
Yeah, it's always a good feeling when that happens, right? It's like, hey, this I every once in a while on our podcast as well. It's like somebody, even a friend, they'll be like, "Hey, I've listened to your podcast," and I'm like, "What?" Thank you.
Yeah, man, and we obviously had a kind of bit of an informal meeting, before we did this recording, and that's where I found out that you have a background as a musician.
Yes.
So let's talk about that for a second before we kind of jump into what we're doing now. Kind of tell me a little bit about that.
Well, so I grew up in kind of a musical family, but my grandmother was a concert pianist, and all my brothers played. We all played in bands growing up, and I decided I would like to give it a shot as a profession, right? And so I did, and we were playing mostly rock music back then, in original clubs and doing that, and everybody makes $200 for the night type thing, and
Yeah, yeah,
you drink more. It's like the Blues Brothers, right? You drink more in beer than you actually made or whatever that night.
for sure,
But
for sure.
so we were doing that and writing songs, and I actually got a chance. I wanted to go to college, so I worked my way in a music store, and I really got a chance to network with some of the big bands, Aerosmith and those type of Eagles and those type of bands, Billy
Right,
Joel's bands,
right.
um, and it was a great experience. And then I also was a professional DJ, so I made a lot more money as a DJ than I
I'm
made
sure. I'm
in the
sure.
bands.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Uh, but then eventually that led me to Berklee College of Music, where I went to, and made more relationships there. And
Which is a very expensive school to go to. Yeah, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't even know they would accept me, to be honest with you. I didn't really think I was that great of a music. I thought it was good, but I didn't think I was Berklee material, right? That
Right,
type of
right,
thing.
right. And a
Um,
lot of famous people have come out of that school that have gone on to be, very successful in the industry. You know?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a great school. It's a great school for networking, especially,
Right.
because it's
Right.
Berkeley.
Right.
Um, I didn't really find the music education as good as I expected it to be
Gotcha.
quite frank.
Gotcha.
I was going to I had a degree going on in business at a state university and taking music classes, and I was like, wait a minute, we're using the same book.
Ah. Okay.
Like, well,
Yeah.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
$200 a credit, $2,000 a credit. Wait a minute, what's going
Right.
on?
Right. No. Right. No. For sure. For sure. No, I get
So,
you. I get you, man. I get you. So that journey, obviously, you pursued that, and then take me through your journey, and I became jumped into like you jumped into business, and ultimately, started your company. So, and then we'll kind of intertwine what we're going to talk about after that.
yeah, sure. Well, there's a high correlation between musicians and people who sell, or musicians and people in business. It's
For sure.
interesting.
For sure.
The the what happened with me is I was doing okay in the music business. And actually almost made a six-figure income in the music business at that point. So I was doing okay.
Right.
Um, but I ended up talking to, and Barry, if you're listening to this, Barry Goodrow of the band Boston,
Okay.
and he was telling me their tour schedule that they were going out on.
Okay.
And For those of you who aren't familiar with Boston, they were a pretty big band back in the 80s, 90s for sure.
Right. Right.
And I was like sitting there listening, and I'm going, you know what? All you guys on a bus for all these hundreds of days, that's not really the life I want to lead,
Yes,
you know?
look. Let me tell you something. Look, it's not a life. It's not a glamorous life. People think being a musician is a glamorous life, especially a touring musician. It's really not.
Nah.
It's not a sexy life. I mean, yeah, you get nice on the stage, but you're in tour buses, you're in shitty hotels, and small town after small town. So you really have to want to do this if this is your goal, because it's not glamorous as people think. So yeah, I agree with that. So go ahead.
Yeah, and there's a lot of musicians who actually have written songs that, about like Turn the Page by Bob Seger,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Wheel in the Sky by Journey,
yeah, 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 yeah.
a lot of people write about it. And for me, I wanted a family, right?
Gotcha. Understood.
And I knew some friends who were comedians, and comedians have the same type of
For
life,
sure. For sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Especially the ones who you hear about the ones who are actors, but the ones who are the comics who are in the comedy clubs, right? Though again, same type of deal. On the
Yeah.
road, four or five shows a week, small town, small club, small club, small club. Again, it's much more of a grind than it is of
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I got you.
Yeah, yeah, and I had the advantage because I of the music business um, connections I had. Even talking to some of the old timers who were in there, like Bobby Hebb, who wrote a song called "Sunny." He was telling me about he backed up the Beatles, like so that's how old that is. But
Hmm.
people like that, and it hadn't changed through time. It was you got to have butts and seats and play
Yeah.
music and
Hmm. Hmm.
and um and it was just like I knew that it could happen quickly for some people, but for most people it takes a long
A
time.
long time. Yeah, a long time.
Literally sometimes a decade or more to
For
actually
sure. For
get there,
sure.
right?
For sure. Yeah.
And I was just at a place, Darrell, in my life. I was like, you know what? I want to have a family, and I don't want to like, miss my kids, 10th birthday party, and
Right.
all
Right.
that
Right.
stuff. So
Right.
I was like, well, what could I do? And then that's when I became a DJ, and because I figured I can control my schedule more, playing
Okay.
mobile events, and still
Hmm.
be in the music business,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then I ended up deciding, I had finished school, so I'm gonna get a job, and I decided, selling was fun.
Gotcha.
So I
Okay.
went into that. I just kept going there, and then my first job out of that was something that I, did quite well at it, and eventually, started making a multi six-figure income, and then was offered a $450,000 position within the company. And I was
Hmm.
like, okay, well,
This
all of
is
these things sort
yeah,
of,
working. Yeah.
supported diapers and baby formula and all these things that I was doing. So,
Yeah.
it started out that way. Then eventually I discovered, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and I started teaching it. And then as I started teaching it, other people were getting good results, and they were paying me handsomely for that. And
Yeah.
so then I ended up entering into a little company that was owned by Chet Holmes, who wrote a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. And I did quite well there. And Tony Robbins, who's a kind of a big, imposing figure,
For
when you're
sure.
next to
For
him, he's a big
sure.
man, very big
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Super nice guy. He decided he wanted to buy into the company. He did. I ended up becoming their president of training and sales, and I ended up doing some great things there, increasing their close rates from 17.8% to 43.2%. I increased product sales 4,150% on one product that they had, and a bunch of other really good accolades there. And that's where it really took off, because when you can help Tony Robbins, you can pretty much help anybody. That was kind of the thought, right? That
Right.
everybody had.
Right.
So, I did work for Intuit, Procter and Gamble, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, CBS Television, and numerous others on the big noted names. And then I helped tens of thousands of small businesses in group trainings and one-on-one trainings and things like that. And so it all kind of took off, but the correlation I always found was, music is something that moves the emotions,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's the only job of it. That's the only. I tell people this all the time. Music is the only job of music is to evoke emotion, some kind of
Mhm.
emotion. That's the only job of music. That's what
Yeah.
it's there to do. And it doesn't care if it's a bad emotion, a good emotion, a sad emotion, whatever the a fiery emotion, you know, all kinds of things. Sorry about those. I'm getting texts. Sorry about
No,
yeah,
I agree with you 100%, and
yeah,
I always like the fiery emotion type thing. That's why I played rock, right? A
yeah.
lot.
Gotcha.
Um, because I remember driving down the highway one time and then looking down at the speedometer and going, oh, I'm going 94 miles an hour. And I'm rocking out to this tune, right? And I'm like,
Right,
so, I better back off of that.
right.
In sales,
Hmm.
you're doing very similar things. You're
Yeah,
moving people's emotions. And just like you said, you can make them happy, sad, angry, whatever.
yeah.
Um,
And I think even for me, right, working with independent artists, like people don't understand because there's a few different. There's at least 6 points of contact before I can close the sale. Because there's a difference between having a job and having to actually generate revenue.
right.
That's a different thing. Doug, that is very difficult to do. And people think that's easy, you know, that's hard to do because to get to build enough trust, right? People buy from who they know, who they like, ultimately who they trust, right? So you have to be able to get people to trust you, right, through attraction marketing,
Yep.
right? And that means, okay, what is your topic and what are you selling? And you got to basically let them show them that you're at least some kind of expert in what you're talking about. And you have to do that consistently, right? To be able to build a trust. And then you have to bring, now that qualifies once they come in as, once they trust you, that's a potential lead, but you haven't closed it yet. You have to then, start the conversation, start the funnel, you know, and get them to ultimately feel, okay, this is something that might be interesting. Even with that funnel, then okay, let's have a meeting. Because see, I'm the type of person where I don't put my prices on the internet
Mhm.
because with what I do, everything is a case by case situation. So if I put my prices on the internet, one that I might freeze out a potential client that
Yeah.
even though I know what my worth is, I still might want to work with them based off if I like that person and if I feel like I can help them. So I make people have a meeting with me to get my prices.
Yeah.
right?
And you said a bunch of things that really are true, right? We all
Uh-huh.
prefer to buy from someone we trust, like, and respect.
Uh-huh.
We will buy from people we don't, depending on the problem, the
Yeah.
opportunity, or the goal we're looking to set.
Right.
And if all of you are going, no, that's not true. I bet you've dated someone. You'd go, it was, and you dated them again, even though you weren't 100%, right?
Right.
So,
Right. Right.
uh, um, and the cool thing about selling is, you brought up something really important, um, Darrell, because building trust a lot of times creates contact, 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 right?
For sure.
More familiarity we are. That's why, like, when we date, we don't just go on a first date usually and they go, let's get married and have
Mm-hmm.
children and all that stuff, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
usually a series of contacts
Right. Right.
because we're building trust or not through
Right.
those contacts.
Right.
And music's the same way, right?
Yep.
You
Yep.
listen to a song once, you go, oh, that was cool, and then you're like, well, then you hear it again and you hear something different in the song.
Right.
And you're like, well, I didn't know there was a bass riff here or whatever, is going
Mm-hmm.
on. And then
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
you continue to hear it, and then before you know it, it's in your mind,
Right.
and then it's a familiar thing. So you hear it
Right.
again, you're like, now you can sing along with it, do whatever
Right.
you want.
Right.
So it's really building familiarity and trust.
Correct.
And everyone, and a little intrigue too, because every once in a while in a song, you're like, what did they say, that word, or was it this word? Right.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
so selling's the same way.
Gotcha.
Building revenue is the same way. The thing that I want people to catch out of our whole conversation, if I could be a little bit
For sure. Go ahead.
persuasive here, is
Mm-hmm.
the music industry is like all other industries. It is a business of selling.
Yes. And the creatives hate to sell, by the way. Like they don't they're fearful of it, most of them. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? They hate they hate selling. They hate the business of it, right? You know what I'm saying? So go ahead, but I just want to reiterate that.
I know, and it's a lot of people feel that way because they don't really understand what sales is all about, which is you're helping somebody solve a problem.
Absolutely.
You're helping,
Absolutely.
right? So, like,
That's
if
what you right, 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 right.
yeah, and if somebody had a problem, most people would naturally try to help somebody with a problem. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, let's just say, a grandmother who has a flat tire on the side of the road, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We'd probably pull over and see if
We could
the
do something.
grandmother was okay, or
Exactly. Yeah,
uh,
exactly. Mm-hmm.
that's really selling. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just people view the formality of it a little differently. I view it as selling and dancing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The formality part of it is the dance.
Yeah.
And as long as you can dance, and your partner and you both can dance, then no one steps on each other's feet. And if you do, you usually overlook it. Um,
Exactly.
but we're really solving problems, helping somebody gain an opportunity that they're looking for, or actually resolve a goal, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
music business is no different. Please understand, folks, when you go and pitch your music,
Yeah.
you're actually pitching to somebody who has overhead
Yeah.
and they're
Well,
looking at it from a business point of view of dollars in, dollars out equals.
yeah. I mean, if you take the live experience, right? So artists will say, well, why? Well, you need to pay me to perform. I said, well, the promoter, for them, where's the value exchange? The value exchange is you have enough people that want to come see you, right? Put
Mhm.
bust in the seats that will then buy drinks
Yeah.
and buy food
Yeah.
where they make their money.
Yeah.
So then the return is I will pay you a fee because you bring enough people in that where the value exchange makes sense. So if you're a new artist or independent artist coming up, but you don't have a large following or you're not well known in that particular place, and you want to only sing original music, that promoter's probably not going to want to pay you a lot of money because nobody knows your songs, who are willing to stay in the room and listen and ultimately buy food and drinks. Now, if you come and say, hey, I want to do a bunch of covers that people know, put my spin on it, that's different because people know these songs. They'll hang around. They'll have a good time. They'll eventually buy food and buy drinks, and the venue makes money for the night, right?
Yep.
And so that's kind of how it works. So that's why you have musicians who there's a difference between being a singer and an artist. And I say that because you can be a professional singer all day, but the minute you want to actually sell original music,
Yeah, very.
that's a very different thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm looking over at my piano over here on the right, and
Okay.
I write songs, right? But I'm not selling songs. When I go to sell that song, it's a very different business than the writing of a song, right?
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
saying it's creative. I'll sit there and be creative. If I wanted to sell it, now I have to package that in a way that is a value exchange, as you're saying, Darrell. And
Yeah.
this is selling. And for those of you who want to play live events, I can concretely tell you this. You know, build a list, have a following, because then you can go to that promoter, you can go to that venue, and you can say, look, on average, I bring 300 people a night into this place.
Right.
And there's your value to them because, you know, they have overhead. They
Right.
have to sell drinks. Or if they have food, they have to do that. They have personnel that they're paying. They have people who are
Exactly.
serving.
And whether five people show up, they have to staff it for the night, right?
That's right.
So this is why bars because have what they call a bar guarantee. A lot of times you have to pay that guarantee up front.
Right.
So that guarantees, hey, you got to pay us this up front. Anything else that comes in after that, we can negotiate a split
Right.
because at least they've made their money, they've covered their costs, what they anticipate to make, and
Right.
now you've already because you've eliminated that burden off of them. So now anything we make off of that, we can talk about the splits at that point, and things of that nature. So yeah, at that point, it's business because they have to make money. So there has to be a value exchange. Your talent is not a value exchange. And that's what artists don't understand. You being talented doesn't mean anything. You know what I'm just being honest, man. Like, you know, you
Well, and if we look at big names, right? Like even old names, new names, the
Mhm.
Grateful Dead, what were they known for? The Deadheads, right? The Deadheads
Yeah.
would follow them from show to show, right?
Right, 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 right,
Jimmy
right.
Buffett, Parrot Heads, and they would follow Jimmy from show to show.
Right.
Like, if you say, hey, Taylor Swift's going to be here
Right.
because she has such a strong presence,
Right.
they know they're going to fill the venue, or I don't
Yeah.
know, Rihanna, or
Yeah. So they could command the performance fee, because they know what's going to be done, and those type of artists are doing arenas, so it's a different game, but
and
yeah.
Darrell, you brought up something too, Darrell, which was I remember listening to a interview with Kevin Hart,
Okay.
and Kevin was talking about one time, I think it was a bowling alley or a chicken restaurant or whatever.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Early in his days, they booked him to go do a
A
comedy thing
reset.
like at
Yeah.
a bowling alley or something
Right.
like that.
Uh-huh.
And he said he was grateful to have it because he got paid. But the thing is like there's like 12 people in the audience,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we when you get to talk with people who have been there and done it,
Yeah.
it isn't, it's a lot of fun, but it is a grind, just like growing revenue in any other business. I had a
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about
friend.
that. Yeah. Talk about that for a second. What that looks.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I worked with a guy named Brian Madej, and Brian was a drummer.
Okay.
And Brian was a drummer originally for a band called Stories. And this is
Okay.
a very old band. Their most famous song was a song called Louie, what was it? Louie, 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 Louie. Yeah. About a white guy dating a black girl, and the family didn't like it, right? There was
Right. Right.
this
Right.
old song. Um, and it's funny when I watch him play on that video, on MTV or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And but then he went from there and he went to Lou Reed.
Okay.
So when he got out of Stories, he played for Lou Reed,
Okay.
and he backed up a little band unknown at the time called Kansas.
Okay.
And he watched how not Lou Reed, but how other established artists
Okay.
we're not treating them with decency and respect.
Right.
And he said to me that the guys from Kansas always said when they make it, that they're always going to treat people with decency and respect. Everybody.
As you should. Right.
Right. Well, eventually Kansas became Kansas.
Right. 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 Right.
Right. And huge, huge success.
Right.
And the point is that at every little stage, we've got to be able to sell ourselves to the next stage. And it's not as easy as people think it is.
Right.
I remember listening to an interview. Barry Manilow did this, and Bruce Springsteen was also in the same room as Billy Joel.
Okay.
And when they were talking about the old days, Barry was doing okay at that point. Billy Joel was hardly known except locally. So wasn't the boss, right, so to speak.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I remember them talking. They must have had the same promoter because they were talking about the promoter, and Barry was starting to get some stages that were bigger. And he said, Bruce was always talking to the promoter, like, and Billy, same thing. Just get me more gigs. Just get me more gigs. Just get me more gigs. Right.
Right. Right. Right.
So they're selling themselves. Now you think about Bruce Springsteen, like way back when, yelling at a promoter to get him more work because they need more work.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Well, folks, what makes you think that Bruce Springsteen didn't go through exactly what you're going through? The only thing is he went through it way more than you probably have.
Yeah.
I remember one time, Darrell, we played this place. We filled it because we had our people come.
Okay.
And the next night, it was a blizzard.
Okay.
We showed up to play. 14 people showed up. They couldn't drive.
Right.
So the place didn't want to pay us.
Oh, man.
Right. But I remember hearing Sammy Davis Jr. say he was in Las Vegas and that they didn't want to pay him,
Right.
Back then, I guess it was the people who were not running it now, the mob, right? That
Right.
type of thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just want people to understand that it's not all, golden pavement and roses, and that you've got to generate revenue and sales in the process.
And let's talk about that for a second, right? So for artists, most of the time their revenue is going to come from merch. From merch, especially in today's day, you're usually going to have merch and VIP experiences, right?
Right.
So merch looks like, t-shirts. Believe it or not, even CDs are still very relevant, even in the digital space. So especially if you're dealing with a Gen X or baby boomer generation, right?
Okay.
Who still believe in the CD, right? So
Yeah.
because the problem is on social media, a lot of the marketers now on social media usually are only talking to Gen Zers. So a lot of times in this era, we're in a content era, right? So but the problem is like I work with an artist right now who's in his early 50s and he's a boom bap hip hop rapper, right?
Yep.
So, but he's not, his audience is not necessarily heavily on social media or heavily on the content. So we're going to focus on the DJs, right? Who who still are a very relevant thing, a very relevant source, but we forget about the DJ because we feel like, oh, we have social media. We don't need a DJ to break a record.
Right.
But there's still an audience that wants to hear the type of music. I bring all that up to say, when it comes to how we generate, through merchandise, you have CDs, you have T-shirts, and then you have VIP experiences, right? What could that be? VIP experience could be coming to the sound check, right? Before everybody else gets in. People pay money for that. Something that also when it comes to having a private dinner, right? Because the whole thing with the VIP experience is to see that artist or have that fan, the super fan, because VIP experiences are really only for the super fans that really care, right? So they want to have an experience with you that, it might be off of the stage, right?
Yeah.
That not everybody else is going to experience, and they're willing to spend a lot of money to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah.
Well, what you're talking about is cross-selling, and you're talking about upselling.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
And then doing it multiple times is increasing buying frequency. Those are three tenets of actually revenue growth.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. People will pay for an experience and they want to pay for an experience. I mean, I'll give you an example. This is so weird that we're bringing this up because
Okay.
I've got to leave for Las Vegas, and you know, all the guys on the line are probably going to be like, well, firstly, I'm at the end of the baby boomer tail, right? So,
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay.
but I'm going to Vegas, and I was looking for a show for my wife and I to go,
Okay.
and
Okay.
we're going on a business trip, and we're going to meet some friends there, go to a show,
Okay.
and then I was like, you know what? I would love to meet Barry Manilow.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
a lot of you on the listening to
I
this are
have no
like,
idea probably who is Barry
Barry
Manilow.
Manilow. Why
You
would
go,
that be like the guy
yeah,
you want to go meet,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Well, Barry used to write these amazing ballads, and I would just like to ask him a few questions about how did you make the transition here to this thing in Mandy, or could it be magic or whatever, right? Like
Uh,
these type of things. Now, the funny part about Barry Manilow is most guys will never admit they listen to him, but a lot of men actually like him, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and and so I'm like, oh gosh, I wonder if I can get VIP tickets to Barry Manilow, like
Right, right.
backstage, just hang out with him for 30 minutes, be able to ask him some questions, right? He didn't have that, believe it or not,
Uh, uh,
but he did have very expensive tickets
okay.
if you could buy. But
Right.
the point being is, oh, and by the way, I can't do it because he's not playing until the following week. But
Okay.
um, I did look,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you take anybody who's kind of doing stuff, and as you said, they're not making the money on the music anymore. They make some,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
it's
It,
kind of like an author. They don't make a lot of money on books.
right,
They make it on the exposure.
right,
And
right,
so as a musician, we've got to think about exposure
right.
as the ultimate because the bigger you can build your name, then you can get into other things like maybe even, parts in movies.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I would highly suspect that if Taylor Swift wanted a part in a movie that,
And she's acted before. I mean, like, yeah, she's definitely done. Yeah, you're definitely right. I think that um as you at the music, especially in the streaming era, right? The music has become the lost leader. So you're losing
yeah,
on the music, but you're making it up. Because I would rather you because a million streams, right? A million streams is only about $4,000,
yeah,
right? So but you can make $4,000 selling 40 t-shirts, you know,
right,
at a particular price.
right.
So again, it's like you use the music to sell the merch, to sell the other things, because those are what's going to generate the revenue. And then, and then again, you're able to, as you grow and as you build your name, right? Because most of the artists that we're talking about are still artists who are kind of up and coming, right? So they're not gonna be able to always command a performance fee everywhere they go. But if you can say, hey, I'll come do the show, I'll send my merch on the back end. That's a paid gig, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of it is about mentality and how you view it. But sales and revenue is and sales for most creatives is a very scary thing. They don't like to do it. You know what I'm saying? They don't like.
But it's not a choice if you want to be in a business of music.
Exactly. That's the thing. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's exactly right. If you just want to play music for the sake of playing music and you like your day job and you just want to play music, that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
rather go do have a good time doing that, because people who do that, I'm totally fine with it. The minute you want this to pay you,
Yeah.
you have to be okay with, okay, I gotta sell. And the best time to sell, Doug, is when right after they get off the stage. That's the
Mhm.
best time to sell what you're doing, right? Because they want to be able to take you home with them. The best way they can do that is to buy something that you have for sale. So
So my oldest daughter, who's 25 at the time, Oh, she's 24 at the time. Now she's 25. Um, Stevie Nicks went on tour.
Okay.
And so, she wanted to go see Stevie Nicks. Now, being an older guy, I used to play all kinds of 70s music and stuff. And when she was a little girl, riding around in the car seat or whatever, right? So I don't know if that had any influence to it, but she just loved Stevie Nicks. Well, her sister wanted to go too. So, now they're willing to drive 5 hours to go to Stevie Nicks concert. And so she comes back with t-shirts. I'm like, how much did that cost? $65, that type of thing.
Right, right, right.
I'm like, for a t-shirt, right?
Right, right,
But
right.
but I remember back in my day, I'd go see, I don't know, Kansas or Styx
Mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
whoever, right?
Right, 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 right.
And we do the same thing. T-shirts were like $22 back
Yeah,
then, right? But they were
yeah,
still high. And so, the thing is that what you're saying is spot on, Darrell. If you're not going to be in the business of the business,
yeah.
you're not going to make it,
Right,
because the people who are running this run it as a business. Well, and people understand this. Guitar Center, right?
right, right, right,
Well, they don't sell instruments at a loss.
right, 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 right,
Right? They
right,
don't open these retail locations around the United States to go out of business,
right.
right? They understand the business they're in. They're in
Yeah,
the business of selling musical instruments
right,
to musicians
right,
who want to then play music,
right,
and
right,
they do it at a profit.
right,
We as musicians must learn the same thing.
right,
Otherwise, you never, if you don't play the game of business, you're not going to make it to the people most of the time
right.
who are willing to allow you to play the events in the venues you are, no matter how good you are,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
And so I used to have friends who were promoters here in Boston, and I'd be like, "Why are you promoting this band?" And it's because they make money.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd listen to three or four bands play for them. I'm like, "Whoa, this one is amazing!"
Right.
Like artists, and they're like, "Yeah, but they can't draw a crowd."
Yeah,
Right? And it's
yeah.
like, that's how they make decisions.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to, man. That's what it comes down to, man. Doug, before we this has been a great conversation. Before we get out of here, man, how can the people connect to you? How can they reach out to you if they want to
Yeah,
learn more
sure.
about?
Well, so they can email me directly at Doug at ceosalesstrategies.com, right? Plural on the sales, plural on the strategies. They can check out my website, which is ceosalesstrategies.com. They can check out my LinkedIn, which would be Doug Brown 123. And if they're interested and growing their revenue, I mean, we train people on how to do that. If they're interested in, by the way, everybody on this that's listening to this should have some type of follow-up system. If you don't have a follow-up system, you're going to definitely drop the ball. So we built one. It's called Vibitno, Vibitno. So at vibitno.com, you could check that out. And just email me if you're interested in having a conversation. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Wonderful guys. Well, look, this has been a great episode. My new friend Doug, wherever, and we had a great conversation, guys. And this has been another episode of the Encourage Inspire podcast. And this is your host, Darrell Peart. Until next time, I'm out of here. Peace.